Welcome to the Choose on Purpose podcast, where we live with intention. And I'm your host, Becky Ploutz. And today we're doing our strategy conversation around the theme of inspired action. And I'm joined by Kelly Fox and Terry Sayer. Good morning, ladies who live in California. They're a couple hours behind us. So happy you're here. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're working with an acronym as we do for the strategy hour. And our acronym that we're moving through today is inspired. So, right, we're moving from inspiration to action through the small, consistent steps that align with our dreams. That's the whole intention here, right? And thinking about we just came off in the Work on Purpose, the Purpose community, we came off of the theme of creative flow. So these just, keep building on each other as we are interacting in the community, in our lives, with our clients, as we get to reflect and really look at, how we're energizing the way that we live our lives. So the acronym today of INSPIRED is really to help us focus in on the I is intuition first. And we talk a lot about those nudges, those feelings, the inspiration that hits when, really when I'm doing something creative. So I would want to just open it up to ask Kelly or Terry if you have any nudges that you're feeling right now in your journey that you want to open up and just kind of share some insights on how you're listening to that inner knowing and that nudge and that intuition.
Well, I usually get nudges. I call them prompts or whatever. Um, right when I'm saying my prayers, because I
Mm.
believe that those are you know, I think they come from God. So
Yeah.
I get them every day. Whether I take action on them or not, that is the question. So this morning, I was praying specifically about this nonprofit thing that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday we came to some conclusions about the we needed to change the whole format for the car show because it's just not working with the person that we're working with. And
Mm-hmm.
Shay is just not going to work with them anymore. So this morning I got this nudge to contact the chamber, who does a huge car show.
Wow.
And I set up an appointment with the CEO this afternoon to see if they would help in kind sponsorship by helping us do the car show. At least giving us their contacts
Yeah.
and their all of their material, their how they sign up, and then I'm going to ask my grandson and my son-in-law to just be the people that will judge the car show and help
Mm.
with that, which I think they might do that. Neither one of them is real um, outgoing to do things like that, but both of them belong to car clubs. And so I just felt so much better because yesterday I was just concerned. What are we going to do? How are we going to? It's
Mm.
already on all the literature and we can't just call it off. So that was my nudge today and I took action on it.
What I love about that is thinking about sitting with that question of like, well, how can I? You already knew it was like it wasn't something you wanted to scrap and be done with. So then you were left with thinking about, well, how can I? And then you were able to access more inspiration to say, oh, I have these resources. I know these connections. I do have people I can continue to reach out to or ask for support and ask if they're willing to, do something. So I love that because it's accessing your knowing and giving yourself the opportunity to just say, well, how can I versus I can't, right?
Hmm.
We talk in my house and in the community a lot about, can't being like a swear word, we need to like
Yeah,
go
yeah.
away with that. So thinking about how we can versus can't do something, and that's really going to your intuition first and tapping into well, what now? Yeah, I love that. Kelly, did you have anything that you wanted to share?
Um, well, originally I was going to share about looking for jobs and um, you know, opportunities that arise and how do I want to address them. But I just quickly want to say, Terry, we need to have a conversation with everyone about that.
Well, yeah,
Um, and especially Melissa and Manuel, because I don't want to
yeah,
uh, isolate them.
no,
So,
absolutely. I'm aware of
uh,
that.
so yeah, so that's going to be, us following our intuition as a family and how are we going to address this issue with the two people we brought in to add the car show
Mhm.
and this being their guy that they brought to the table and how do we want to best approach that?
Yeah,
Because ultimately this is our nonprofit and our brand and, you know, our event and we want to make sure that everything's in alignment. But we're
mhm.
still appreciative of them and what they've
Yeah,
contributed so
Kelly, we
far.
absolutely are going to do that. I mean, that's a given.
Well, I'm just saying that's the
Yeah,
nudge that I'm getting.
yeah, yeah, I
Is
got
that
you.
this is an opportunity for us to really tap into our intuition and as a family of how we want to approach this as we involve people outside of the family into what we're doing. Because I mean, even, earlier Terry saying bringing in this other person, making sure that everybody in the family is, on board. Um, because it is a big deal to bring in people outside of the family. Um, and it's exciting too, because it's expanding, right? And that's what
Yeah.
we're doing now. We're expanding, we're up leveling. And so just making sure that we're tapping into our intuition so that we're all feeling good about it and in alignment with the expansion that is happening. Um, because a lot has changed from when I started the Break the Silence. And so that's been a challenge for me as well as, yes, I want this expansion. Yes, I want more people involved. Yes, I want help. And how am I going to um, embrace all of that without being triggered or, you know, um, basically triggered by things changing and um
Yeah,
and
so
stuff.
Kel,
And
I want to
so
jump
it's
in and
like,
say that the next piece is to name the next step. That's the N. And I'm
oh,
seeing how
okay.
this can go together with the conversation too, because, right, when we get those intuition hits and we have a nudge, it's like something does need to, right, change in our lives, in our process, whatever that might be. It's like, okay, well, now, what if the strategy is right? We feel that. And now we get to name what the next step is. You get to decide and choose. How do you want to react or respond, hopefully, to those nudges that, right? We don't need to see the whole staircase. Remembering that it's about the small things that you can change today. So, one, being willing to make the change, and then, okay, who, right? That's what Terry was mentioning, right? She's like, okay, well, if this wasn't the end of it, who could I reach out to? Who could I, enroll to help me? How could I figure the next step out without thinking I need to know exactly how to run this show, right? And the clarity that comes through when we're in motion, right? When we're just naming the next step. And you're right. I hear you saying, when you're doing bigger things and involving more people, everybody needs to be looking at this framework and this strategy of you feel the intuition. Okay, now what's the next step? And you'll see how this is kind of getting laid out, of course, in divine timing here to like walk through this strategy that we're talking about today, because it is really the N is really about what's the next doable thing that can move us forward. Instead of thinking, well, I don't have the next 15 steps and know exactly how it's going to look, but it is about just the next one, right? And I even
Yeah.
was thinking about, my intuition with having a conversation with my husband about um, wanting to learn more about financials. I wasn't sharing that earlier today, but this was a conversation over the last week when I found a book that I believe was a total God wink at a book sale that was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's been in my awareness for a couple of years that I've heard, check out this book, and I hadn't. And then it was sitting there for 50 cents at this book sale. And I was like, ain't no way I'm walking away from that. So, and then it was like this intuition of, okay, I got the book. And then, I just like would sprinkle the next step of like, okay, have this conversation, plant this seed, and instead of thinking, oh, I gotta read the book and do all these things, I'm looking at what's just the next doable thing so that I can start to take a micro movement that is doable in this process so that I can build my awareness around really what my desire is so that my actions are in alignment. It's by taking that inspired movement.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it's just if you get just a little side note, if you get into his work, I have six
Oh, good,
books.
you're familiar. I love it. I've been trying to
I have
find people that I know.
six of his books sitting over here, and I would be happy to send them to you for nothing.
I love it. Well, I'll pay for
Yeah,
shipping.
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, there's a few to move through, and I think if we move through them, we'll have deeper conversations too, because they tend to build on each other naturally in the conversation. So I'm going to move to the S. And I have simplify to align, right? This is another idea of like understanding how it can get mucky and complicated and overwhelming sometimes when we involve more people, more processes, and it gets away from being simple.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
more action doesn't mean that we get more results all the time, right? So are we overcomplicating our goals? I find for myself that tends to be the case. I think that there is 15 steps, when in reality, just taking the next one gets me closer to the clarity of I don't need 10 of those steps that I might have originally thought was necessary because I was looking at it from, the top, right? So simplifying is really stripping back those things to get realigned or to make sure that it feels in alignment with what we're going to move forward in doing because we only have so much time. So keeping it simple is a really big one for myself that is always good to be reminded of. I may be overcomplicating it.
Yeah, yeah. Which is a human thing that we tend to do.
Yeah. So I love the question too of like, what could we let go of this month that, to make room for true progress in the things that matter most to us? What's something that we might be saying yes to that saying no to it and letting it go will free up a little more mental space and actual, time space to move intentionally forward with our desire. The P is prioritize your joy, right? Letting joy lead us through our actions. This is a big one that, in certain times I absolutely lose complete focus of because it's like head down, do what you got to do. But the P is prioritize that joy, right? Share more playfulness in my house, in my work, have more fun in my life because that's what we're doing all these things for, is to, have more joy. And that helps our goals feel lighter. I don't know about you ladies, but when I'm enjoying what I'm doing, time flies. It's a lot more fun and it feels lighter versus heavy. If it's something that I'm procrastinating on, it tends to feel a lot more heavy. And usually it's because I'm thinking about how unfun it's going to be. So, right, thinking about the question of where can you have more fun in the next step? Thinking about, the next connection that you're going to make and the reach out. How can you make it more fun and light to reconnect or to ask for support? What's enjoyable about it?
Yeah, that's a good one.
And then let's keep moving here through the I, the second I. And I know it's going to be a lot, but I see that both you ladies are obviously taking notes, and
Yep.
we can have a rich conversation about how this ties together in our life at a deeper level. So the second I is implement. This is where we tie in action, right? This is implement, and I have imperfectly because myself and a lot of us in the community, right? We look for how to make sure we stay away from perfectionism and wanting to do it the best, the best, the best, and more. But done is better than perfect. So the I is implement imperfectly. So it's messy to get started. It's you know, an opportunity for quote unquote failure or missteps to happen. And that's okay because again, it's if when we're in motion that we'll be able to see, well, what's a step that we probably didn't even know we needed that can make the most progress because it's more simple, right? And I think that the more we can normalize imperfection as part of this creative momentum, the better. Because there's this idea that I know that I'm, again, always like working on completely dissolving and just trusting the fact that massive imperfect action is always going to outweigh and be better than pristine, thought out, meticulous, detailed work or a plan. So the question I would say is like, where are you holding yourself back, waiting for perfect when you could just get started, when you could begin by just taking that one simple step that aligns today, right? Okay, the R is reflect and recommit. Because I think that a huge part of the journey of taking inspired action, we gain more when we do take the time to reflect. So every step, I believe, does deserve to have reflection. So in it, not get stuck there, right? And start to overthink, but keep moving and recommit to what's working. What's now feeling like it's draining and the fun is getting sucked out of something. Or the purpose and intention that we started with when we're checking in step by step, because, right, it's imperfect action that we're implementing imperfectly. So reflection is key because, yeah, there's going to be missteps that happen and we're learning from them as long as we're taking the time to reflect on the step to, keep going without judgment. Okay, that didn't work. Those people don't connect. That process is too complicated. Let's simplify it. So there's a lesson in each of those steps as long as we take the time to learn from them and then recommit to getting back in there and taking action now in the moment from the awareness that we have from before, right? It's building the momentum. in a creative way because we're taking these steps. Okay, we're moving through the E to expand. Expand your energy. I think this is a big part of, you know, the inspired action gives you energy. It's not about draining us. It's not about adding more things to our list. It's about expanding an energy that feels, again, light, fun, positive. It's charged in a way that just lights us up because it's in alignment versus trying to force something, trying to push it up the hill. And this is where, having more rituals and opportunities for breath work, movement, just getting time to reconnect with why we started doing this thing that we're taking inspired action on is pivotal in this process because they build the habits to re-energize the action that we're choosing to take, especially when we're taking the time to reflect on those imperfect things that we've been working to simplify, and step by step, we need to look at, and we get to look at what are the rituals that are supporting us in being in the movement while staying in alignment with that inspired action. So keep track of what those habits or rituals would be for you. Okay. And then the last part is D, declare it. And I say out loud, I am a big believer in speaking life to things in my world. So I read out loud as much as possible. I resisted this for so long in my life. A lot of it was, I'll use Kelly's word of triggers, that from being in school, I hated reading out loud. I was labeled as a kid that didn't read well. So when I was asked to read out loud, it was always terrifying. I was in fear all the time. So declaring it out loud, right, is speaking it, it's claiming it, it's creating it in the moment. And really, I think about how on a deep level, and understanding that I am working on more and more is like our body, the liquid in our body, our blood, the water, it's vibrating as I'm speaking. And so when we declare something and we back it with our belief, it's anchoring momentum for what I want more of. So what inspired action are you committing to now? That's like the punch of like how are we bringing this together as an acronym to make sure that we're paying attention to our intuition first. Then we're naming what's the next step. We're simplifying how to align into the next step. We're prioritizing what's bringing us joy in these processes and where the fun is. And we're implementing imperfectly. We're staying away from the perfectionism when we're creating momentum. And we're reflecting and recommitting to the way that we're moving forward with what we're learning. We're expanding our energy and the way that we're taking action through routines, rituals, habits. And then we're declaring it out loud. We're claiming what we're working towards, why we are, and we're understanding all of those components to make sure that we're taking inspired action. So that's the acronym, because I want to remind us that every ripple, right, of inspired action that we create is building a wave in our life. So thinking about the step, bold or quiet, doesn't have to be a crazy one, right? It can be simple, but it matters. That's my biggest part, is that it matters and it moves you. So think about what that is for you. So, okay, now we can have discussion deeper about our acronym here, ladies. So how are you feeling about the inspired framework that we're building on for movement here?
For me, I wrote down about when we got to the third or fourth concept in the acronym, I wrote down a cyclical process. And then you kind of brought that together at the end. um, Life is a process, change is a process, action is a process, inspiration is a process. So this really gives you a process for checking, or you called it a framework, for checking where you are in the process
Yeah.
and which steps do you want to strengthen? Where maybe is the gap for you? What
Mhm.
are you following a process? I mean, it doesn't have to be, I mean, it's up to everybody to be flexible in the way that they take in information. But for me, this was very supportive and I want to say logical, but that's not a word I like a lot. It was um, inspirational. I like that word so much better. Of a way to check yourself, so that you can think about until you can internalize this process. Because you develop processes for any change in your life, and fearless living is a process. The 12 steps to freedom are a cyclical process that you can buoy up a certain step, or you already are um, effective at a certain step, or there are steps that are more internalized than others. So there are several of these that really struck me that, yeah, I do look at my intuition. My intuition guides my life. I call it inspiration. Um, do I always think of what's next? Probably not. I jump around a lot because I'm so easily distracted. So this is something that can help me stay engaged. That's what structure does for me. It engages me because I naturally jump around and I'm
Mhm.
easily distracted. And what happens when that occurs is I'm shotgunning it, which is a part of my nature. I'm shotgunning it instead of really thinking about it in a structured or process way that's going to help me to have that joy. That
Mhm.
when you talked about uh,
The P.
having that joy, that fun with it,
Mhm.
um, that sometimes keeps me from doing that because of I'm like the dog in the movie Up, squirrel, 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 squirrel.
So
And
Terry, do you feel like you reflect enough? Right? I'm looking at like, okay, the
yeah,
process. And so the R, reflect, would be where
I think my reflection
take the
comes,
action.
yeah, I think the reflection is something that I'm probably working on because I recognize that wasn't as big a part, but I do reflect in my practice of prayer. So I pray for inspiration. I If I don't write it down, I forget it. So I pray for inspiration. I write it down on my list of what I want to try to do. I look at the next step. Sometimes I don't take action on the next step, so that stops the process. So what this does is really help me to see because I'll have a whole list of things to do, and those would be the next steps.
Hmm.
So I have some of this developed, in a process for myself, but
Yeah.
this has helped me to see the cyclical nature of it and think of it more of a process, the inspiration more of a process than, oh, I got this idea. Let me go act
Hmm.
on this idea. But in other words, let me break this idea down into what's next. And
Hmm.
then how can I keep this simple enough that I can have fun and that it can be light and it can be done with ease instead of pressure, and the
Hmm.
pressure comes from wanting to be perfect. And
Right.
so the implementing imperfectly really, really spoke to me because
Yeah.
that's where I am. I'm really learning to do that. and to be okay with that and to learn from that. And that also is, each one of these is a process, right? But all together, it creates this process for taking action on your inspiration. So
Hmm.
a lot of it really, I wrote my little notes with it to what I can do to practice, what I can practice to make this more internal and then make it more ease for me and more
Yeah, so
fun.
the two questions that I have with the reflect and recommit, which I'll just reiterate to make sure that maybe you don't have those written down that could support you in that too, is what's working and what's draining you.
Yeah,
So in
yeah,
your prayer time,
yeah,
those could be two opportunities to bring in as well, that you're getting the inspiration and then help you with discernment, and recognize, well, what on this list could I maybe let go of? That was one of the things too, right? Is what could we let go of this week that may
yeah.
be draining us or giving us that pressure?
And
Or
another one,
delegate.
excuse me,
I think delegate is also a good word because a lot of times we can get
It
inspiration, but
is.
it's not really inspiration for ourselves to do. It's
It's to pass
inspiration for
along.
others.
yeah, to add that to the D. Yeah, to the D of the acronym. That's
Yes.
great.
And that could be
I think,
declaring it, right? It's
yeah,
not mine.
declaring. Yeah, it's not mine. And I think for me, instead of what's working and what's draining, it's what's empowering and what's disempowering. I mean, those are just different
There
words.
you go.
So there's
Yeah.
what's empowering me to go on with, because I can get really excited,
Right.
but it can be, you know, I go rogue. And then, so thinking
Yeah.
about that too, reflecting about that, so the R of reflecting and reconnecting. Um, but when I'm excited about something, I want to be able to go with it, you know,
Hmm. I
and
have that
because I
ADHD
lose my
brain.
momentum if I don't act quickly because I forget. And I can't write down every single thing that
That's because
that's,
inspiration is fuel.
yeah, yeah. The inspiration.
Skyrocket, rocket
Yeah.
fuel.
I mean, again, this is my nature. I'm a person that you know, doesn't even aim before I shoot. That's who I am. I'm important to the group because of that's who I am.
Yep,
Bring that
absolutely.
momentum and excitement and drive to when I was a member of my staff at school, whether I'm on the city council, whatever it is, but I have to temper that and reflect that. And so that part of it where it's reflect and reconnect and recommit is being aware that
Hmm.
that I do that frequently, and it's not that I'm judging myself that that's bad. That's just the way it is.
It's
And
a
so
reminder that we don't do it alone, right?
yeah,
We
yeah.
we have
And delegating,
other people.
delegating is what I've been doing. And
She's
yeah,
usually good at delegating. Mm.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing is I'm finding other people to help us and
Yes.
Yeah.
delegating.
But the thought that came to
More
me
who,
is
not how.
Yeah, yeah.
the thought that came to me is SOPs.
Yep.
Um,
Me too.
having like maybe that's something that we could establish um as a board to have SOPs so that
Hmm.
toes aren't getting stepped on and everything's aligning with the board and the mission and um and so if there's SOPs then there's structure and it's not the board is more of a board than things happening without everyone knowing, right? So that's what we're establishing now. We're establishing a board and we're giving everything organization and we have a mission and we have a statement and we have these things that we're working towards, and does everything we are doing support that mission, you know? Um, because normally we earn the money and we pass it on and we don't
Hmm.
determine what it does, right? But now we're keeping the money and we
Hmm.
have objectives and goals. And so we need to think about it, reflect on it more of how are these decisions supporting these objectives that we now have as a nonprofit? And do they support it?
Hmm.
because now we're raising money for ourselves, not for an organization that has structure and a board and, people
Hmm.
that have SOPs, right? We're doing it for ourselves. And so that's a big change for all of us, not just me,
Right.
right? And um, so yeah, I
And I
think
think
that,
about SOPs as simplifying, right? As the S,
yeah,
right? You can even think about that as how in an organization, especially like simplifying to align would be exactly what you're saying. It would be
yeah,
looking at how to make sure that we have a process in place to bring progress versus being in the overcomplicated steps of, well, who's doing that and how did they do it? And maybe this is a better way. It
yeah.
brings
And
more
I think
order.
that's kind of what's happened is as we've added people in, we have
Hmm.
um a lot of opinions
Hmm.
and coming in. And I think as a board, we need to come together and have some structure, not just an agenda to our meeting that we're trying to follow, but structure to our nonprofit so
Right.
that people who are coming in as committee members or potential new board members understand the structure and the objectives of the board and the nonprofit so
Hmm.
that they're, so that things are happening in a certain way and they're going to happen in that certain way. And so there's not questions, right? Of
Or they're more
how is
simple
this
questions.
right? Yeah, because there's structure and there's SOPs and there's, you know, I don't want to say rules, but like there's,
Yep.
it's
There's a
more
higher
streamlined,
order.
it's more
Yep.
simplified, there's order and we're acting as a board, not individually. Which is what we
Right.
normally would do. I mean,
Right.
so we normally would just make decisions, especially me, just make
Yep.
decisions because it's my thing, but it's not just my thing anymore. We have a board, we have structure, we have people to answer to. There's a lot more responsibility with a nonprofit than just a fundraiser.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think that that's a really great example. And it sounds like you have a step that you're committed to from here, hearing this process. And I'd be curious if you ladies take this, framework or this process even with you to say, okay, like how can we implement this in the board? I would love to hear more about how that goes because it sounds like you've had an intuitive hit today on where to go with
Yeah,
that and
I
how to help
definitely,
yourselves.
I definitely have. I think, our board meetings have involved everybody.
Hmm.
And maybe we need to have a board meeting that's just the board and, lay down some guidelines for ourselves of how this is going to work and how we're going to involve other people and, establish that structure, which probably would have been good to do before we started bringing in other people. But we learn as we go,
Yeah,
right?
that's the reflection.
That
That's the
That's the
imperfect
reflection.
reflection.
action, right? Um, and learning the lessons and,
Yep.
now implementing that, that new information that we now have that, you know, we want to have in place so that we do so that this nonprofit lasts, you know?
And it's
Um,
expanding the energy instead of getting bottlenecked and clogged up,
yeah,
right? That's where
because we
that
want this
that
to
happens.
last. We don't want this to,
Right.
um, fall apart because, we weren't structured right or we weren't organized correctly or
Yep.
because I definitely do want it to expand. I want us to expand out of Tulare County. I want us to eventually, become um, something where we're really supporting a lot of people and we're bringing awareness to more than just the task force,
And you
but
are. And this is
other
the declaring
organizations.
itself.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's the declaring it. So getting clear on, yeah, what is it? What is the mission? What do you want? And I'm going to wrap us up because we're at time to say what I said a little bit ago and just reiterate this to say that every ripple of inspired action creates a wave. So how many, right, people are in the room and hearing it, it makes a wave, but then it's choppy, right? That's what I'm hearing. The visual of like it's choppy, it gets noisy when we're out before we're clear on more of our vision. So whether your step is bold or quiet, it matters and it moves you. So keeping in mind how you want to move forward with your inspired action. So ladies, thank you for being a part of this courageous conversation today about taking inspired action and how it's showing up very active and alive in our lives right now, in our businesses, and our way that we're just going about. So I want to say, Terry and Kelly, thank you for sharing and giving some insights and some inspiration to us. And I want to invite our listeners to make sure that you share this with someone, share it out, follow the podcast. And if you love the podcast and want it directly in your inbox every Tuesday for the new episodes, be sure to subscribe to the Competence Catalyst weekly boost to get these tools, the updates on the episodes, and some exclusive invitations for you being on that list. So I'm your host, Becky Plouts. Love yourself, live fearlessly, and we'll see you next week.